Federalist 69, Part 2. We're going to start with paragraph 4. Again, this is in front of you is a list of scholars, historians that have done a lot of work on the founding of the United States. A couple of days ago, a couple of Federalist Papers ago, I showed one of Jack Rakoff's works. It's a very small book, very well written, on James Madison. The reason I bring these up is that when you get to read these books after you have watched their videos, because the books might not be available to you, you might not have the money or just not have enough money to buy all of them, and if you want to have a big library close by you, so try to watch their videos, their panel discussions, things like that, as many of them as you can. And when you can get the book through the library or purchase it, or maybe you can get a friend who has it to give you the list of the bibliography of each one of these books. That's where you'll come across all these other major historians that have done great work, and these people have used their works to do their own. So always keep that in mind. Just let these names be a reminder of all the other books that these people refer to, and then you can refer to them and learn from them. All right, let me start with paragraph 4 of Federalist 69. And as you remember from the last part, Hamilton calls the anti-federalists people who are just misrepresenting what the Constitution says about the office of the presidency, the powers that are given to it. And he's trying to say the fact that they're saying the president is going to be very powerful, just like the King of Britain, is wrong. He's more like, in many respects, the governor of the New York, the state that we are publishing these Federalist Papers in. All right, paragraph 4. The President of the United States would be liable to be impeached, tried, and upon conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes or misdemeanors, removed from office, and would afterward be liable to prosecution and punishment in the ordinary course of law. The person of the King of Great Britain is sacred and inviolable. There is no constitutional tribunal to which he is amenable, no punishment to which he can be subjected without involving the crisis of national revolution. In this delicate and important circumstance of personal responsibility, the President of Confederated America would stand upon no better ground than a governor of New York, and upon worse ground than the governors of Maryland and Delaware. So he says, our president can be impeached, and if he's really done something criminal, he can even be tried, prosecuted, put in jail. Whereas the King of Britain, you can't touch him. He's there, he's almost like a sacred person. The president is almost like the governor of New York. Next paragraph, the President of the United States is to have power to return a bill, which shall have passed the two branches of the legislature for reconsideration. And the bill so returned is to become a law if, upon that reconsideration, it be approved by 2/3 of both houses. So he says the president has a veto power, but it is a qualified veto. In other words, 2/3 of both houses of Congress can overturn it. Whereas the King of Great Britain, on his part, has an absolute negative upon the acts of two houses of Parliament, has an absolute veto. The disuse of that power for a considerable time past does not affect the reality of its existence. Because after the glorious revolution in 1688, 1689, and then around 1708, pretty much Parliament had gathered enough power to not let the king or queen have an absolute veto. So that's what one of the historians, J.R. Pohl, says about it in his edition of the Federalist Papers. And here Hamilton says, just the fact that the king or the queen hasn't been able to use it for this past 7, 8 decades, it doesn't mean that he doesn't have that absolute power. So he exaggerates a little bit, like I said in part 1. And it is to be ascribed wholly to the crown's having found the means of substituting influence to authority, or the art of gaining a majority in one or the other of the two houses, to the necessity of exerting a prerogative which could seldom be exerted without hazarding some degree of national agitation. So the king or queen in the past has been able to corrupt part of the ministry, part of the parliament, and that's how they've been able to actually do sinister things. The qualified negative of the president differs widely from this absolute negative of the British sovereign, and tallies exactly with the revisionary authority of the Council of Revision of this state, of which the governor is a constituent part. In this respect, the power of the president would exceed that of the governor of New York, because the former would possess singly what the latter shares with the chancellor and judges. But it would be precisely the same with that of the governor of Massachusetts, whose constitution, as to this article, seems to have been the original from which the convention have copied. This is very important when he brings up the Massachusetts constitution. I'm drawing a blank right now whether I have mentioned this before or not here in this series, in my reading of the Federalist Papers. I know I've mentioned it multiple times in my translation, so bear with me. Let me say something about the Constitution of Massachusetts. The Massachusetts Constitution was ratified almost like the Constitution of the United States that we are talking about right now was going to be ratified. So it was held pretty high, because they said Massachusetts has done a good job. They've gone to the people rather than legislature to say, you are the fountain of authority and power. You are the one who's going to have to ratify and accept this Constitution. This way it'll become the supreme law of the Commonwealth or state of Massachusetts. And by looking at that, that's one of the reasons that the founders decided that this is an excellent part of the Massachusetts Constitution. And what we are going to in turn do after writing the Constitution, we're going to send it to different states, and we want the special ratifying conventions in different states to ratify this Constitution, not the legislature. In this way, we say the people are the ones who have given authority to this Constitution, not the legislatures. That's why they could write, "We, the people of the United States," at the very preamble, the first few words of the preamble of the Constitution of the United States. So here he says that we kind of copied what Massachusetts has done regarding this executive branch, this part of the Constitution. But in fact, they've done other things copying how the Massachusetts went about writing and ratifying their conventions, which is very important for us to keep in mind. So when we go through these Federalist Papers, remember, even though they're addressed to the people of the state of New York, they're going to be eventually read by people from other states, especially people who are going to be either going to the ratifying convention or who are going to influence the people who go to the ratifying convention of different states. It's very important to remember that for a constitution to be the supreme law of the land, it has to be ratified in a special ratifying conventions whose delegates have been elected by people for that specific purpose. If the Constitution is ratified or accepted, okayed by the legislature that's sitting there in the state, then that's not much of a constitution. So that's one of the most important things about how this Constitution was ratified. So keep that in mind, and we will make progress, as this is a pretty long paper, and I'm not going to try to make too many comments after this.